Сподіваюся, що більше не буде ніяких сюрпризів. Тепер ми можемо розпочати нашу панель. На жаль, трошки із запізненням, але нам пообіцяли, що все-таки 1,5 години у нас буде. Мене звати Анна Куземко, я доктор біологічних наук, працюю в Інституті ботаніки Національної академії наук України, є віце-президентом Українського ботанічного товариства і членом правління громадської організації «Українська природоохоронна група». І мені доручено промодерувати цю панель, яка називається «Природа, біорізноманітність», біорізноманіття, в якій ми будемо говорити, власне, про те, про що вже говорили в першій половині нашої сьогоднішньої платформи, про те, як відновити нашу інфраструктуру, всі ці руйнування, які зроблені, але так, щоб це було дружньо для довкілля, ну не лише для довкілля, а саме для біорізноманіття, для природи. Ну і ще, звісно, наша природа дуже сильно постраждала від війни. Масштаби руйнувань, вони просто вражають, і ми, напевно, ще не до кінця їх осягнули. Тому ми також хотіли би поговорити про те, як нам відновити нашу природу, як це робити правильно і що нам для цього потрібно. Ну, власне, цьому буде присвячена наша дискусія, але я би хотіла спочатку представити наших шановних спікерів. Це пані Вікторія Кірєєва, заступник міністра захисту довкілля та природних ресурсів України. Це пан Олексій Василюк, голова правління громадської організації «Українська природоохоронна група». Пан Сергій Зібцев, професор, доктор сільськогосподарських наук, який представляє Інститут лісового і садово-паркового господарства Національного університету біоресурсів і природокористування України. Пан Богдан Вихор, виконавчий директор Всесвітнього фонду природи в Україні. І у нас буде ще спікер онлайн. Це пан Гаральд Егерер, голова секретаріату Карпатської конвенції. Ну, перед тим, як почати нашу дискусію, я хочу нагадати нашим спікерам, що зараз у них буде виступ. Таймінг у нас доволі жорсткий, тим більше враховуючи, що ми і так трошки запізнюємося. Тобто вам буде надано 5-7 хвилин на виступ, а далі ми перейдемо до дискусії. Ну і спочатку я би хотіла звернутися до пані Вікторії і запитати все-таки, яке бачення Міністерства захисту довкілля, яке бачення уряду, як правильно має відбуватися відновлення довкілля України, як має бути взагалі відбуватися зелене відновлення.
Дякую, пані Анна. Прошу вивести презентацію. Вітаю, дорогі друзі, колеги, партнери. Мені дуже приємно сьогодні бути в цьому залі, представляти саме Міністерство захисту довкілля. І дуже приємно бачити багато знайомих лиць, яких насправді турбує питання відновлення України за зеленими принципами. Уявіть собі територію Швейцарії, вкрита повністю лісами, де збережені природні екосистеми. І саме така територія – це територія Природно-заповідного фонду України. Більше 4,1 мільйонів гектарів. 7% території України. Тут мешкають бурі ведмеді, пелікани, зубри та інші наші браття та сестри. Понад 70 тисяч видів живих організмів. Але зараз понад 1000 з них перебувають під загрозою зникнення. Природа – це не просто естетика. Вона працює на нас. Ліси поглинають СО2, болота координують вологість, клімат, екосистеми забезпечують нас повітрям, водою та їжею. Але цей природний баланс порушується, він уже порушений. І кожен із вас уже відчуває на собі зміни клімату, підвищення температури, як і взимку, так і влітку, нестачі питної води, як деякі наші регіонів. І природа втрачає здатність захищати нас. Але в той же час природа має два удари. Вона має перший удар – це зміни клімату, а другий удар – це військова агресія, яка зараз проходить на території нашої України. Ми втрачаємо з вами не лише території, ми втрачаємо з вами спів птахів, ми втрачаємо з вами прохолоду лісів, ми втрачаємо гармонію, яку саме нам дає природа. Ми втрачаємо нас самих і наше життя. Сьогодні більше 1 мільйона гектарів природно-заповідного фонду під окупацією або в зоні бойових дій. 900 об'єктів постраждало, 80 об'єктів втрачено, понад 20 тисяч диких тварин і птахів загинули. Це не просто цифри. Це мовчазні свідки злочинів терористичної агресії Російської Федерації. І ці тварини, ці екосистеми можуть зникнути сьогодні вже назавжди. Щоб природу не просто зберегти, а дати їй шанс правильно відновитися, нам з вами потрібно вибудувати чіткі правила. Нам потрібно з вами побудувати конкретні і рішучі дії. Для природи мало лише написати стратегію чи закон. Потрібні дії, потрібний план, по якому ми з вами повинні рухатися. І початок повномасштабної війни показав, що Україна може не тільки говорити, а Україна може приймати рішучі кроки. На сьогодні вже заборонили джипінг у заповідних територіях, щоб зберегти спокій для тварин. Почали регулювати гуманне поводження з дикими тваринами в неволі, розробили плани збереження видів, які зникають, запустили моніторинг біорізноманітті, і зараз дуже багато присутніх саме в цьому залі працюють по цьому напрямку. А ще Україна рухається до Європейського Союзу. І для нас саме впровадження європейських директив є одним із найголовніших в нашій діяльності. Тому для нас запуск і імплементація пташиної директиви, оселищної директиви є надважливими саме в процесі євроінтеграції. Також додатково хочу сказати про директиву, яку ми хочемо імплементувати, це про відновлення природи. Це нова директива, яка запущена в Європейському Союзі в 2024 році. Її мета не просто зберегти, а відновити вже пошкоджені болота, річки, ґрунти до природнього стану. І я називаю цю директиву, і, можливо, в майбутньому наш закон про надію. Бо навіть поранена природа
It will be named the law which is hopeful, because we can, even the most damaged nature can recover if we give a chance. And these days our international partners help with their financial and technical support, and I want to thank them on behalf of the ministry for all these actions.
Як я сказала,
As I said, to recover the nature, it's not about just fantasies, it's about clear plan. And right now the Ministry of Environmental Protection, together with all the partners and experts, are working on the strategy of biodiversity by 2030. First of all, it includes the assessment of environmental damages due to the war, the recovery of rare ecosystems, the ecosystem approach, the solutions based on nature, not concrete, the integration of ecology in post-war recovery. And in this panel, we have to say that the integration of the environmentally friendly principles and green recovery is the basis of this recovery. And we shouldn't build our future on the ruins of the nature. We have to build it together with the nature. This is the principle we have to follow together.
навіть під обстрілами, навіть
Even
при війні,
under the shelling, in the war, we do not stop. We create new territories, and of course, each of us wants to have as many of these territories as possible. But in 2023, 2024, 188 new natural reserves territories were created, and the ministry plans to create more national parks in Donetsk, Luhansk, Kirovogradsk, Odessa, regions, and it's really important to create new reserves on the new territories, because we have to implement the principles of territorial recovery, and the ministry will work on that and will work on the regulatory framework to
Сьогодні є дуже велика проблема.
help us move in this direction. But the biggest challenge is the mines. More than 1,200,000 hectares are mined. That's why we cannot recover them, and they remain to be dangerous, not just for humans, but also for all the animals. And here is a big question, the question of institutional capacity. It's like overdue, and the creation of the new governmental body which will work on the recovery and make sure that biodiversity is saved and will manage the natural reserves. That is something that we have to work on, and this is the priority in terms of the regulation and management of the natural reserves, because the creation of the new and current territories of natural reserves, that is the investment into our healthy future. And due to that, we can show that Ukraine is developing and is still living.
Але окремо хочу звернути увагу на те, що
At the same time, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that we're not just losing territories and forests. The war has affected our animals. Millions of household and wild animals died and lost their habitat. That is why the Rehabilitation Center of Wild Fauna have become one of the new directions of the ministry. Since in Verkhovna, Cheremotsky national parks, these centers are functioning to save the bears and wild birds affected by the war and human activities. But as of today, these centers are overcrowded. In Ukraine, there aren't enough specialists. The financial support is very low. That's why we've decided to create 5 new rehabilitation centers that will focus their work on recovery of animals affected by the war. And separately, I'd like to say that we've started the work on the creation of the Center of Dolphin Rescue in the Black Sea region for the animals who are maybe not directly affected by the war, but they are still affected by the war. I want to separately thank our German partners helping us in this regard, and I want to offer all experts to join us, because in 2025 we will start this dolphin rescue project. And lastly, in the presentation, you can see what we want from the green platform, but I can tell you that nature is not something additional. This is the part of our life. This is the part of our safety. To recover our house, that's possible. We can recover the forest in years, but those species which disappear, we won't be able to recover them. So biodiversity and safety in this regard is just as important as all the other types of safety, and this is the contribution into victory. Thank you.
Щиро дякую, пані
Thank
Вікторія.
you so much, Victoria.
Дуже приємно те, що
It is so nice that as we introduce academia and community and our vision, our plans in general, they match the vision of the government. And here I'd like to give the floor to the public sector. My next question goes to Alexei. So when we speak about the recovery of our damaged nature, what do we understand by this word recovery? How should we prioritize all the steps? What should we recover first? What can be recovered and what, unfortunately, we cannot recover or maybe doesn't need to be recovered anymore? So could you share your opinion as the representative of the environmentally protective community? Anna has asked the question in the way that I have to represent the public sector. So I work also in the bioreserve Oskania Nova, and it's my opinion. It's not just, the opinion of some state organizations or NGOs. Anyway, the recovery, everywhere we hear about the green recovery. So maybe, well, not maybe, but for sure, for a lot of people, it encompasses different definitions. For example, we really like that there are some green leaves, and it gives us some hints for the nature and understanding of the nature. So, of course, when we say green recovery, we want to encompass into it at least partially the recovery of nature or environment in general. Well, basically, the nature and the environment is almost the same thing. There is no legal difference between these two terms. So it would be great for this green recovery not just to be about the recovery of the infrastructure and everything related to it with the use of more modern green standards. For example, I do believe that one day Azovstal will be recovered, but it won't be recovered following the architectural schemes of 1930s. And I do want to believe that there will be modern materials and standards, and it won't become one of the contaminating factories of Ukraine. But it would be great for all the green plans, green strategies in the country, for all the laws and bylaws to have separate points related to the environmental recovery. So probably it's not very nice of me, but could I ask you to change the slides for me? Well, let's consider it to be as cooperation with the ministry. I'm humbled a little bit and turned red and blushed. So, green recovery in the way I want to see it as the environmental recovery as well. Well, we have to understand that it has to involve, here you can see this picture of this forestry in Serebryansk, although whenever we hear about this forestry, you know, near Kiev there is Konche Zaspa, the elite area, so it's not that area which, like right now when we speak about the forestry in Serebryansk, very often they mean the forests in Luhansk Oblast, which were on fire along that region. So, well, this is Luhansk region, and I also decided to use this picture because it shows the most important situation, like the biggest fires of forests were happening there. But there are other areas in Ukraine which were damaged by the war, where the environment was damaged. For example, a lot of people were relocated from some areas, and, for example, at first, it seemed like, how can we settle people somewhere? But people settled somewhere. People do not stay at railway stations anymore. They are in some other places. And the anthropogenic pressure on the nature of these places has increased because it would require some additional compensations or additional measures to recover the natural potential. There are a lot of different projects. Our association, the Ukrainian Nature Conservation Group, they analyze a lot of the projects related to such natural preservation. Well, we need to make, like, for example, in the forests near Kharkiv, I for sure believe that we need to recover Kharkiv, but I doubt that we need to make some kind of crater in the which is huge in that area. For example, in Ternopil or Lviv, there are some different areas with the rare types of moss and other species. So it would be, of course, considered. And lastly, let's speak about the wood. I do not work in this area, and I cannot guarantee whether the wood which is cut for the construction and engineering for fortification objects, even if it's necessary, this would. But even if it gets there, it is additional pressure for the forest ecosystems, which have to be recovered later. Well, of course, I will not say a lot about it because Victoria has said, but a lot of the natural reserves and territories were damaged. So the temporarily occupied territory includes 44% of the natural reserves. Not all of them were damaged, but it turned out in a way that also the territories which were deoccupied, like we need to really differentiate territories which are occupied and deoccupied, because always the biggest natural reserves were in the area which ended up in the occupation. So, like, less than 44% of Ukraine is occupied, but the biggest number of these occupied territories are natural reserves. And also Emerald Network here, maybe you cannot see it very well from this distance, but you can see the green, blue and red colors. The natural reserves which were occupied and deoccupied and in the government-controlled areas. Well, you can see the percentage, like how many of those territories are red, how many of those territories are green. And unfortunately, these territories are more valuable than in the other regions of Ukraine. Of course, all the natural elements are very valuable, but just like Askania Nova natural reserve and all the reserves of Science Academy, the Black Sea Reserve and Danube Reserve, it definitely was damaged due to the military actions, and they are under the preservation. Some of them have already celebrated their 100th anniversary. Others are about to do that, and in the last 100 years, they managed to preserve the species which do not exist anywhere else. For example, in the reserve Kamieni Mohyly, they have 2 species which do not exist anywhere else. And in Mykolaiv, where the Russian troops were stopped, like they have the last 15 hectares of the very, very rare flower, corn flower. And it means that we can actually lose something. That is the fact. We can lose it for good, forever, but let's not even talk about it. Let's not speak about the territories which are occupied. We will have to wait for them to be deoccupied to speak about their recovery. But we can think about some compensation. We need to think about the creation of new natural reserves, because we don't have as many of them. Even in the neighbor in Slovakia, they have 35% of all the territories which are natural reserves, and we have only 7%. We still have a lot of the beautiful places which are close to the temporarily occupied territories, and we can rename the settlements, the streets. We can support the communal enterprises in Mariupol, but for some reason we haven't created the natural reserves in these territories. We renamed Sverdlovsk into Dovzhensk, but we didn't manage to create any natural reserves there. So, and the last one. But my final thesis is about the fact that all of these points are the details of the strategies that we need to work on. But there is something that we can't impact, because the nature won't wait for our decisions. Here you can see the map of Ukraine. And this is like the picture after the explosion of Kakhovka dam blow up, but the whole front line is green. This is the biggest green area in Ukraine, and it's not the wild nature. It's the unbelievable number of plants or weeds, or as scientists we name them as invasive weeds, advantive weeds, and different plants, mostly from the northern continent, like Northern American continent, that are not afraid of high temperatures. And it's one more problem. Let's imagine that demining will happen for at least a few decades, not like some experts say 750 years. So in a few decades, the explosives will go deep under the ground, under the roots of the old trees, and it'll be difficult to plan anything. That's why any recovery of Ukraine has to be planned, taking into account the natural processes. And the final slide, which was deleted. Well, that's interesting. There was a beautiful picture.
There was a beautiful picture there. Well, it's okay. Maybe as many slides were left as many I had to create. But there was a wonderful picture with a forest, which is now at the place of the former Kakhovka water dam. And this is the only example when, as the outcome of really bad events, we have something natural recovered. So I give back the mic to Anna. I do hope that the processes of recovery of Ukraine will include professional biologists. Thank you, Alexei. Really, this kind of life-confirming slide was the first one with Kakhovka Forest, with a newly created one. But unfortunately, it's not the end of our technical surprises. Now we need a 3-minute break because we don't hear the interpretation. So, oh, Zoom is not working. Okay. And we must have 2 speakers online. So let's wait until everyone hears and sees everything.
Вже чули
Recording in
про червону
progress.
зону у Франції, але про неї теж мало що відомо. От пошукайте в інтернеті щось про червону зону Франції. Є 2 мовами стаття в Вікіпедії і гарне відео хлопця, який зміг туди проникнути і показати, який він класний, що він зміг туди попасти. Але такі території є в Німеччині, в Бельгії.
But such territories exist in Germany, in Belgium, in the UK, in Bosnia, and many other countries. Why is it like that? Why don't we know that much about those territories? Because according to some of the criteria they got there, Either they are too mined or they are too polluted. When there was World War II, they also had lots of chemical weapons, which fortunately it's not that much now, and I hope it will never take place anymore. But the idea is that these territories in all of those countries, for instance, those are not natural reserves. Everything is overgrown with greens over there, as you named the wonderful ecosystems. All of those are the ranges which are used for the military, and those territories belong to the military as well, because they were affected by the combats. And because of this reason, we don't know that much about these territories. But the zest of this story, I used to visit one webinar together with the colleagues from the European Commission, and I can see something similar as well. And the next speaker asked to add, besides his report, he added to my words, yes, you were right to say that, but do you know, why do we have old forests close to Berlin city? Because it is all mined, it is not full of accommodation. But do you know what happens when the forests are on fire? Everybody is evacuated. And then BBC makes a movie how the forests are growing after the fires. And of course, they took a decision to leave the territories for the nature, because demining would mean to destroy nature. It's okay when after the war, the territories are left for the natural recovery. The only thing that after the end of the war will need to have it at the level of our state and to get the consultations how other states did that, because for them it's a military secret. We cannot ask them which criteria did you use. They cannot do that because they need to get to the Ministry of Defense first. Thank you, Alexei. I was told that we have already resolved the technical issues and we can move on to our discussion. And here I would like to pose a question to Mr. Serhiy Ziptsev. The forests are maybe such an ecosystem which maybe together with the steppe was mostly affected by the combats. But in comparison with the steppes, forests need much more time for recovery on the one hand. And obviously they need to be recovered. But on the other hand, in the societal understanding, people think that you need to plant the forest and then the issue is solved. According to our experience, it's not true. So the question to Serhiy goes to you. How do we recover the forests in the proper way? How do we recover the nature? Where do we need to plant forests where we shouldn't?
5 хвилин.
Доброго дня.
Good day. I am the representative not only of the University of Bioresources of the National University, but the regional Eastern European Center of the Fire Monitoring. We are the only organization in Ukraine which conducts monitoring of fires in Ukraine all over the territories, both in the occupied territories, the combats. And this is some of the statistical data. Let me show it. I cannot have more than 2 slides. The organizers did not allow me. So, especially for this event, we have the map of the State Emergency Service, of the territories which were damaged by the war, and we estimated this area. As for forests, it's more than 2 million hectares of forests. We need to say that in Ukraine, altogether, we have 10.6 million hectares. So that is approximately 20% of the forests, which are now either in the combat zone or occupied as of the area of the forests. And we also distribute and separate, when we speak about the impact of war for the forests, we look at the battle zones, and you can see it on the fire map, which is below, and it is the direct impact, mechanical impact, fires, fortifications, different premises, and shelling, and so on. And we look at the rest, 7 million hectares of forests, which are beyond the direct impact area, but they are also affected by the war, because the government made a decree to provide the population with the woods, and the armed forces of Ukraine need to be provided by the timber to create fortifications. And also there was a decree to construct accommodation for the people who were affected by the war and who lost what they had. So all of the forests of Ukraine are affected by the war, but undoubtedly the ones which are located in the battle zones, in the combat area, are the most affected. And first and foremost, when we speak about the forests, at the front line, they are losing all of their functions, structure, biodiversity, ecosystem services. And however, those forests are also have the negative consequences of their drying up. They can be burnt out, so they can negatively impact the climate. It's not just destroying the forests, it's some global issue. As I already mentioned, we consider, we calculate the area of fires since 2022, so the 24th of February. We have the most precise data. More than 2 million hectares were on fire. It's not only forests, those are also the arable lands and all of the types of floodplains. More than 2 million of hectares out of the 200 million hectares, 48.7 tons of greenhouse gas. This is the influence of the on the forests, direct and indirect impact onto the climate. And I need to say that after deliberation of Kyiv, Cherkasy, Chernihiv regions, part of Kharkiv region, the forests, the substantial part of the forests in the Kyiv region are brought back to the forestry manufacturing. The roads are demined, the forests are demined as well. So this is the perspective for the future. We can see that if pollution, well, I don't say mining, I say pollution of unexploded devices. If it is that substantial, you can demine it, but if it is not, then it is the example of Brandenburg and other European examples, Bosnia, Croatia, Macedonia. You can see huge areas of forests at the Balkans which are just fenced. But the animals from time to time die there. The local population can die there as well. So we cannot just say, let us leave the forests with this pollution as they are, so that the nature may recover. I wouldn't say that this is the most sustainable solution, because sooner or later some people or some animals, well, we know they unfortunately can find all of the explosive objects which are still dangerous in 20, 40, 50 years. So I would think about more sustainable solution of this problem, looking at the example of Brandenburg in particular. And next slide, please. Should I do it on my own? I did it. So, on what we have to do. First and foremost, as of today, the State Emergency Service map which I showed, the territories, the areas which were impacted by the war is not that precise. Some of the forests which we consider 2.2 hectares, some of them are not polluted by the explosive objects. It is a huge work on creation of these maps. And another piece of work is to provide those maps for the local population, which goes to gather mushrooms and berries, and also provides those forests for grazing of the cattle. And the second task is scientific research. Now we don't know that much about the impact of war for the forests. We don't know how much of forests have died out or have been burnt out. Well, we know how much was burnt, but still we don't know what recovered at these areas because the war is ongoing for more than 3 years. So it is the task number one. Only the government can solve it because LiDAR shooting is very expensive, but it will give us the answer to the question of the environmentalists and the local population's questions, what we can do further on with that, because we need also systematization, classification of those forests, the natural, not natural, and so on. As soon as we know the influence of war, we need to develop the strategy for the management of these forests and recovery of forests, because as of now, the ministry has confirmed the strategy, it seems to me in 2019 or in 2020 by the forestry management. It was before the war. Now it's not relevant anymore. So we need a new strategy. What are the objectives? There were lots of discussions here about the objectives of the recovery. What would we like to? Natural forests? Just any forests? Maybe steppe ecosystems? We don't want forests anymore? Should be solved by the government together with the society. What our strategic objectives are. When we define them, then the parliament and different institutions are developing bylaws and instructions and guidelines. And those institutions, like the State Agency on Forest Management and the State Enterprise Forests of Ukraine and other agrarian forestry enterprises, will implement this strategy according to this legislative framework. And we consider that it is high time, unfortunately, it is sad time for Ukraine as for the climate change. Those are unprecedented fires in 2020, in 2021, 23, 24. The biggest fire used to take place in the exclusion zone, not in Luhansk region, of 80,000 hectares, and it's a new challenge for us. So we cannot solve it by the old ways. The forestry experts cannot cope with the fires which we can see on the screens of our TVs. So only all of the land users and land owners and also the fund who don't have enough of funding, they need to solve this issue, which will expand and grow. Unfortunately, California shows that we do not have enough of equipment. It's almost the end for me. So, which would be cope to with those top 3 fires, so we shouldn't allow them. And the most important thing I'd like to say that we need to change the way of thinking and the skills of the people who will implement this strategy in all of those legislative acts. Now, in our branch, we have 29,000 of professional forestry experts. I don't think that they know that much about climate change, about the new strategy, and so on and so forth. So they will also use what they know how to use. If you would like to see the forests which we have now, it's okay then. That they will do that. But if you'd like a new strategy, a new approach, they need to be trained for that. And we need certain means and measures for that. Thank you. Sorry for taking too much of your time. Thank you, Sergei. Really, there are challenges, the issues are multiple, but I thank you that you raised the first and foremost steps. I think that we'll have the opportunity to discuss them. And now there will be the question to Bogdan. When we are speaking about the recovery of the destroyed infrastructure, we made a deal that it should be friendly for the nature. Which risks could be entailed by it? What could be the perspectives, how we should do that? Please. Thank you. I would ask to show my presentation as well. We all specifically understand that the post-war recovery of Ukraine will start with the recovery and reconstruction of the infrastructure, the linear transport one, which is the multiplier of the economic development, and the energy infrastructure, including the infrastructure with the renewables, wind or solar panels. And our main task and the challenge which we face is that how we can prevent possible negative influence in the development of the linear transport infrastructure or energy infrastructure on the nature, biodiversity, and the economic interconnection, climate adaptation of the ecosystems. If we speak about the issues connected with the development of the linear transport ecosystem infrastructure, what are the main risks? First of all, that is the loss of the ecological interconnectivity or fragmentation of the certain species or migration ways of certain animal species. And also it can have direct negative impact onto a person, onto a human being, because when the transport infrastructure is going through important migration ways of wild animals, those ways are used by the wild animals. Still, lots of people and animals can die along these roads. So our task is to take into consideration the migration ways of wild animals in the planning of the linear transport infrastructure and to take as many measures as possible so that those risks could be prevented. Well, obviously, in the strategic way, this is right to comply with the risk, do no harm. If we can avoid a very valuable area, we should create the road around it, not through it. But if this situation takes place, we need to take more measures and other solutions. We need to have a very specific and understandable monitoring system of biodiversity. I thank the Ministry of Environmental Protection, which works on the development of the strategy of biodiversity, and its operational plan foresees the creation of such a system of monitoring of biodiversity. It will also mean that, together with the strategy of biodiversity, we are also adjusting the national legislation, which will not only include the environment, but it will also include infrastructure issues. In particular, WWF Ukraine, together with its partners, helped the development of the national construction standard, which is working since 2023. But it's just the beginning. Much bigger work should be done in the future, which means that we'll have to create favorable conditions for the investors who will be ready to invest money into the linear transport infrastructure, which will also be secure and take into consideration environmental and climate risks and social factors. If we speak about the development of the energy infrastructure or the infrastructure of renewables, then it's also important to understand that we need to take into consideration the risks connected with that. For instance, if we create any wind stations, solar stations, then these infrastructure objects will be created not on the territories which are valuable for the preservation of biodiversity, because our task is to prevent any loss of biodiversity and not to do too much of harm. I know about the case that now the forest road is being created in Shipit through Uzhhorod, through the forest, but it is the road to nowhere, through the virgin forest. As it is creating, it is the road to nowhere because it creates substantial risks for the investors who are ready to invest into the renewables development, into the energy security of our country. So the main task of our country is to provide proper management and to exclude at the legislative level any risks which are connected with certain irreversible harm for the natural ecosystems. So again, we have a wonderful reason to implement the Euro integration principle, do not significant harm, which is also about the context for the development of infrastructure, transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, so that we could prevent the negative influence of this infrastructure on the biodiversity. We could preserve the ecological interconnectivity, we could avoid fragmentation of the populations and vanishing of certain species of the animals, which means the development of good investment policy which would exclude reputational risks and include the necessity of the adaptation of national legislation to the best world practices. And let me end with a positive example. We had an opportunity as the team of WWF Ukraine to be involved in the discussion of the construction of the Circle Road of Lviv city. The experts and the scientists provided their recommendations about the infrastructural solutions to create ecological interconnectivity and to avoid the negative influence of this ring road onto the important migration ways and the objects of the Natural Reserve Fund at Lviv region. I think that these positive experience has to be considered within other important objects which will be created in Ukraine. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Богдане.
Thank you, Bogdan. I think that this principle, do no harm, has to be used in any activity of ours. And now we also have one more speaker online, Mr. Harald.
Hello, Harald, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me? It's my turn.
Yes, yes, perfect. So nature has no borders, and my question will be about how do you see the green recovery of Ukraine, Ukrainian nature, Ukrainian biodiversity from transboundary point of view? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Please, can you put on my presentations on the screen? I send you my greetings from Vienna, where we are in the Vienna International Center, the Secretariat of Carpathian Convention. And it's my big pleasure to lead this panel here together with the WWF Ukraine. Thank you very much. For the green recovery of Ukraine, we believe it needs to be based on ecosystems and on healthy ecosystems-based recovery. And that's why also the Carpathian region as such will be important for the green recovery for the whole of Ukraine. And also Minister Grinchuk, but also Deputy Minister Kyrieva have today mentioned the importance of natural areas, of forests, of water bodies, and so on. Can you now maybe please go to my first slide? I cannot see it from here.
Just a moment, some
Yeah.
technical issues.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
no problem.
I'm so sorry for these issues, but presentation is almost coming.
Let me know, otherwise I can try to do it from here. If there's I could also try to share it myself. Just let me know. I'm here. Yes, very good. I can see the first slide. So as I said, recovery of Ukraine means also recovery based on ecosystems. I'm going to bring the example of the Carpathians. With your permission, you can please jump to the first slide. So you jump one slide, please. That was two, maybe one back. You go one back because it's yeah, well, very good. Just to show you, take you to a small walk now to one specific part of Ukraine. The Carpathians are in the west of Ukraine. Most of you know them. They are only 5% of territory of Ukraine, but they have 20% of forests, and mostly very precious forests. But they are also a natural bridge to the EU, and they are one of the most international places in the world. You can see the red circle there. They are Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, and Ukraine. 5 countries meet there, and that's quite rare in the world. If we go on, please. Next slide. The very special value of the Carpathians and their unique biodiversity and culture have led to the adoption of an international agreement for protection and sustainable development of the Carpathians, the so-called Carpathian Convention, or also Kiev Convention, because it was signed in Kiev in the year 2003 already. And also in 2022, the 7 parties to Carpathian Convention, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia, they adopted a declaration to support Ukraine in these difficult times to address the negative impacts of the horrible aggression on Ukraine and on the Carpathians. Let me please go to the next slide. There are very strong indirect impacts of the war on the Carpathian region, which are aggravating the current global crisis. We all know about climate change, about the loss of biodiversity, about land degradation and pollution, but the aggression on Ukraine has indirect effects on Carpathians, such as pressure by increased population influx, the loss of the equipment in the parks, in the natural parks of Ukraine, increased pressure on forest ecosystems, impact on water courses and water bodies, and so on. So the global crisis and the local crisis are reinforcing each other. We can go please to the next slide. And that's why we believe that green recovery of Carpathians touches upon many sectors, not only environment and nature, but in fact all sectors. So it's important for the nature and biodiversity, but also for forests, for sustainable tourism, for agriculture, for climate change, for people and their living. That we have to design this Carpathian Convention like a boulevard as in a holistic way to address all the challenges together. And the special situation about Carpathian region is also that we can start working today. We should not wait any longer for this aggression to stop. The work can start and continue today as well in this very special part of Ukraine. Can we please jump to the next slide? So that's why the Carpathian nature will be an important part of the whole Ukraine recovery, and the Carpathian the recovery in the Carpathians and the Carpathian Convention to support the Ukraine Green Recovery Platform as a whole. And we believe in that in a way of making impact through ecosystem-based recovery. The Carpathians can provide a stepping stone or a sub-regional approach by, for example, supporting the national natural parks in Ukraine directly, for example, by developing green tourism. but also very important, mentioned today already, to support the Ukrainian forests, the protection of virgin forests, but also the promotion of close to nature forest management in this part of the world. And we have established a trust fund for that purpose. Or another example would be to enhance partnerships for green recovery at the local and municipal level. If you can please jump to the next slide. And the unique role of Carpathian Convention is in this respect the link, the international link, and the link to the EU integration and international integration through projects, through knowledge transfer from the EU and to the whole world, to the Carpathians, but also to spread these experiences and approaches to the whole of Ukraine as good examples. So we can transfer knowledge with our partners to Ukrainian Carpathians work there, but this will influence also the green recovery and the transfer solutions to the whole of Ukraine. Now can we go please to the last slide? So with this respect, we say that the green recovery of Ukraine should be based on functioning and healthy ecosystems. Ecosystems-based recovery would mean based ourselves on the healthy environment to support the well-being and the healing of the people. Please be in touch with Carpathian Convention. You have it here. And with this respect, we send you all our greetings from Vienna to Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eggerer, for your presentation and for your activities, of Carpathian Convention in Ukraine and for your support. Thank you so much. Зараз ми закінчили виступи наших спікерів, і у нас ще є два
Now we
виступи
have
за
finished the
аудиторією.
speeches of the speakers. We have two more speeches here, one online.
Давайте спочатку послухаємо наш один виступ
Let's
онлайн.
listen to one of the speeches online from Viktor Demchenko, the Doctor of Biological Sciences and Deputy Director of the Institute of the Sea Biology. I am here with you.
Я сподіваюся, що ви нам розповісте.
I do hope that you will share with us briefly, if possible, because we're going over time. You'll briefly share the information on the condition of our sea ecosystems and how to recover them the right way. Let me briefly share. Well, of course, I'll try to do my best to be brief. We have to focus on the fact that sea ecosystems and on-the-ground ecosystems require comprehensive solutions. And these solutions, they are complex, multi-level, and they require clear understanding of what's the situation in the sea. Unfortunately, as of today, most sea ecosystems are not researched, and we have big problems with the data which makes it possible to understand what's the current condition of the sea ecosystem. It's related to the fact that we have the safety and security situation which prohibits boats and ships in the sea. So we have some problems related to this data, and we had a strategic decision. Before the war, the Ukraine adopted the sea environmentally friendly strategy, which stipulated specific steps of what needs to be done in different sectors, directions to reach good environmental condition in the sea ecosystem. But unfortunately, when the war hit the country, all these measures were frozen and put on hold due to clear reasons. But we understand that we need to change this strategy because we had significant problems related to the fact that to assess the impact on the sea ecosystem after Kakhovka dam explosion. Right now we have the problem of oil contamination in the Black Sea, and these problems, they pile up, and they may have different scale of impact, and that's exactly why the level of the assessment of the sea ecosystem condition will be the priority when we develop the recovery strategy. So that's why we believe that apart from the scientific needs, we need to engage into the recovery processes different businesses, because here we speak about the potential development of the sea culture and the recovery of different ecosystems. In particular, that's related to our sea areas. But all these problems can be solved after the war, and of course, we need to recover our limands, and we hope that we can make it possible after the end of the active military actions.
Дякую, пане Вікторе.
Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you for outlining specific proposals and suggestions. We hope that they will be considered and will continue this discussion. Now, right now, Anastasia Tropoluk, the Foundation of the Natural Protection of Ukraine. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank all the participants. I'd like to highlight only a few points which have already been discussed, and I'd like to dive deeper into them. The most important thing is that we discussed different points. We share some vision in some areas lack data, there are a lot of considerations, but someone has to implement all of that. Who should do that? Well, it's about people, it's about knowledge, it's about transportation and fuel, it's about the uniform and all the costs for business assignments. I mean, all of that matters, and we have none of that funded in the state. So our green platform that was started last year, the main aim of it was to create such platforms in the state, in the government, so that we'd have a chance to work on that and create that and put that to practice. Because right now we have different discussions, different meetings, but since everyone has limited time, no resources, nothing gets implemented. And if it's implemented, it's done by 0.1% out of what actually needs to be done. So I address your attention to the fact that right now, in the Ministry of Environmental Protection, there aren't enough workers to do all of that. No matter how talented they are, as Mrs. Victoria, no matter how smart they are, there aren't enough of them. So it's impossible to have significant changes. The same situation is on the local level. With Elena, we recently ran the institutional analysis, and we can say that in our state, in the area of biodiversity preservation, on the state level, national level, well, we have 10, 15 people working, not 17 even, 15 people who work on this topic on the whole country. If we take in the hectares, like per person, not of the whole biodiversity, but of all the natural reserves foundation, it's about 500,000 hectares per specialist. It's impossible. If we go down to the regional level, 24 people working in all the regions. That's impossible to have the good result. And we compare it with other countries. Czech Republic, it's a very, very small country in contrast to Ukraine. 800 people work there on different levels to preserve biodiversity. It's not even taken into account the national parks. 800 people working in the agency. We have no people working in the agency and 10 people working on the national level. What can they do? Nothing. If we continue analyzing this situation, the same situation is in the national parks. Our organization supports 10 national parks. We provide them with the fuel, cars, and trainings, knowledge, online technologies, you name it. But it's nothing, and it's just 10 parks. And in the Natural Reserves Fund, there are 80 of them, so this experience has to be shared. The most important thing is to create the agency. Nothing will work if we don't have the agency.
Дякую, Настя. Ну,
Thank you, Anastasia. Well, right now we don't really have much time for the discussion, but I do hope that we will have the Q&A session so that we would manage to have a good discussion. So please be concise. Maximum you have a minute for a question and 2 minutes for the answer. Please introduce yourself, ideally if it's a question to one of the speakers. The network of the protection of national interests, a question to the Serhiy Siptsev 3 steps on fire safety in the natural systems, not to have the same situation as in 2020. Who needs to do and what? Who needs to do what and...
Так, дякую за запитання. Дійсно, це хороше запитання.
Thank you for this question. It's a good question, just it's not from the ministry, not from the head of the forest.
Recording in progress.
Ну і друге,
The
стратегія
second point.
зробили, як Настя каже, хтось повинен її впроваджувати.
Well, if the strategy is there, then someone has to implement it. Who has to implement the strategy of landscape fires management? Forestry specialists, they aren't responsible for that. Well, it's not clear.
Дійсно, треба якийсь орган
So
державної влади,
we need to have some governmental body authority that will distribute funds
виділити на
that
проблему пожеж.
the government can allocate to prevent fires and to bring fires under control. As I've said,
Пожеж, які зараз є в Португалії,
bringing
Іспанії,
fires under
Каліфорнії,
control that are in
Австралії,
Portugal,
України,
Spain,
тисячі
Australia,
немає
and
технічних
in Ukraine,
засобів,
we have no
агресивних
technical
вертольотних пожеж,
equipment
які рухаються
to
швидкістю, там, 20 кілометрів
bring the fire
на
under
годину.
control of the
Значить, що
top
уряд
3
повинен
fires,
дати кошти всім
which has the
землекористувачам,
speed of 30 kilometers per hour. So the government has to allocate money for the prevention, but also has to keep the organizations liable for the results. And the second point, which is also important, that is training. We need to train specialists on the new ways of countering the fires. The rules we work by were written in 1980s. Right now, the situation is different. The climate has changed. There is the war, so we need to train people on the modern methods on how to prevent the fires. We work with different villages. Let's say Kosachivka village. We know how to prevent a big fire, they say. The question is, who is ready to invest time and money and resources and organizational effort in this regard? We can say, let's use technologies. So,
Дякую, будь ласка, ще запитання.
thank you so much. And one more question to our speakers.
Чи будуть, ще одне запитання, бо вже
One more question, because the organizers tell me that we ran out of time, although we had just 1 hour. Thank you so much. Tamara Malkova, the Information Center. Bogdan spoke about green recovery and the infrastructure. So I have a question in this regard to the representative of the Ministry of Environmental Protection. So we have the Carpathian Convention, and Mr. Harold said that it's Kiev Convention since it was signed in Kiev. And within this Carpathian Convention, there is a protocol about sustainable transportation, sustainable vehicles. That is something that has to be done in the Carpathian region. Please tell me, is the ministry working on some projects on how to change this infrastructure to comply with the protocol of the Carpathian Convention, that is the law which was passed and signed, and it is in action? Well, the first task, the main aim of the ministry is to comply with this protocol and all the rules that the country has taken responsibility to follow. And you've mentioned the Carpathian region. I would like to say, let's go back to green recovery and speak about the mistake of the country in the process of development and territorial management. We just add this word green after something is done. And we need to change this approach, and we need to add this word green on the planning stage when we plan the activities. And Bogdan was saying that energy projects in the Carpathian regions have to be implemented when the road is being built covering, the virgin forests. It contradicts this approach, and on the stage of planning we had to make it right. And as I see, Bogdan wants to add something. I want to add that we actually work tightly with the Ministry of Environmental Protection and the Ministry of Infrastructure to develop different methodologies on mapping of the environmental corridors in different territories. In the Carpathian region and within this Carpathian Convention, we're doing this, and we test that in Ukraine, and probably will be able to do more within the Czech project, which I hope will start in 2026, where we will synchronize our efforts, and on the national level and on the legislative level, we will have all the necessary documentation and draft laws, but also on the scientific level, we will develop the approaches to monitor and identify the necessary ecological corridors. And I want to thank the Ministry of Environmental Protection because they've done a lot of preparatory work to launch this process. This process has started, but it's not as fast as we want it to be, of course.
Дякую, пане Богдану. Дякую всім.
Thank you, Bogdan. I want to thank everyone. And I was told that we have just 1 minute left, but let me summarize what we've discussed. We've spoken about decisions, solutions, priority steps. All of us understand that there is a lot of work ahead of us, and it would be great for it to be coordinated. Of course, a lot of things have been done, but there is also a lot of work ahead of us. So right now we're speaking about the problems that occurred not 3 or 11 years ago. These problems that we face with our nature and environment, that's our heritage from the Soviet colonial past, where the forests were cut out, steppes were destroyed, and the water reserves were also depleted. Whether we want it or not, we'll have to solve this problem. We'll continue speaking about next steps and plan our activities. I want to thank all the speakers. Thank you, Anna. First of all, we want to thank for great moderation of yours, and we want to thank all the panelists. But I want you to keep in mind the principles and key thoughts, what it is that we want the organizers of Green Platform to know and the whole country to know. Unfortunately, today the law was signed, which a lot of you do not support, but we have to identify the principles of how we want to recover our country. There is no Elena Kravchenko here. I like her saying when she says that all policies are, first of all, the policies aimed at the preservation of biodiversity, industrial contamination policy, ecosystem services. It's all about the biodiversity preservation. So for green recovery, we have to implement the green approach on the planning stage. Secondly, we have to develop the ecosystem services. I mean, the services which will make it possible for all those who use the natural resources to benefit from implementing green approaches. We have to be open. We have to show that the convention works in our country, and every decision, especially during the recovery of Ukraine and preservation of biodiversity, is highly important. So when these decisions are made behind the closed doors, we have to keep in mind that on the example of the biodiversity strategy, we show how we can discuss every stage of the strategy, and I hope this work will be fruitful. So lastly, we have to work with the communities. We need to engage our partners separately. I'd like to thank all the NGOs, INGOs, international partners that you're here, that you're supporting the government in the implementation of the policy. As Anastasia has said, there are only 17 people in the department. a few institutions are present here, and you have way more workers and way bigger capacity, but we're not all alone. NGOs and international experts support us, partners support us, and we move that forward, and I believe that Ukraine will recover to be a better country following green principles. Thank you. I want to thank everyone. I offer to continue this communication during the break. Thank you.